Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron, and I'm back tonight with another episode of Table Ready. Tonight I'm going to show you how I painted up the Cinder Jackals Mercenary unit, which is our homebrew Season 8.5 Merc unit featured in our Aces campaign. If you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. But what I really like about this is, of course, the gradient legs from that bright yellow at the bottom all the way up to that dark red, and then of course the charcoal color torso. Very, very cool design that's fitting of the unit name. A couple of things. Wanted to say thanks to all of our Season 8.5 backers first and foremost, and Death Ray Designs for helping me get the custom Cinder Jackals decals printed out quickly and on time for this campaign. So appreciate those guys over there. But stay tuned. I'm going to walk you through everything from start to finish. Guys, table ready for the Cinder Jackals coming right up. Alright, so here we are, step one. First and foremost, I just spray prime this thing with a Rust-Oleum gray. 1 to 2 coats will do. And then the first step here is really dry brushing with a pure white. Any white will do. And just getting all of the upper extremities and torso area, because when I put that gray speed paint on later, this will help highlight the corners and the edges. So just a little quick dry brush on the upper sections of the mech will do just fine. Step 2 here, we're going to get working on the legs. So I start with orange, and I'm going to go from the knee down. I'm going to get a good coat. I want to get in all the recesses. I'm not starting with the yellow, right? I'm starting with the orange. The order of colors does matter. So once you get a nice even coat on both of those legs, we can move on to the next step. Of course, let it fully dry between each step here. So now I move on to the yellow, and I'm going to work basically just in the lower ankle, feet area. Of course, every mech is slightly different, so you can set the threshold wherever you want. But I am kind of spotting this on. I'm getting that paint jammed into all the recesses. I do want the color gradient to pop out when I go over this with the speed paint, so make sure you get a nice, thorough, full coat. And once that is done, you can move right on to the upper leg. Doesn't necessarily need to be fully dry, but I'm going to use a color called Crimson, and this is just again, all these are just folk art acrylics, so they're pretty cheap and they go on pretty well. You can choose to use whatever paints you like, but a nice bright red will do, and I'm going all the way up the leg and into the hips area. But the next color that's going to go on is going to be a much darker red, almost like a black cherry type color. I am blending in the red a little bit around the knees with the orange as well. I'm not necessarily going all the way up to where the torso is. There's a little bit of space there because I'm going to take care of that with the darker red. So now onto that black cherry color. Notice I switched my brush to a flat brush because I want to get in that recess along where the torso meets the hips. And I'm trying not to get paint up on the gray area. Of course, if you do, don't worry about it. Just get a gray brush on primer or a nice, gray that has good coverage, and you can just clean it up after the fact. But notice I'm doing some very light downward strokes to blend that black cherry in as well. So now we get into the speed paint, and again, please make sure that the acrylics are fully dry before you do this step. I used a color called Fire Giant Orange. This is an Army Painter speed paint, and I am going over everything from the knee down, from the orange all the way down to the yellow, and you'll get a pretty decent gradient effect as the speed paint will look slightly different on the lower part of the leg than closer to the knee. Just take your time, don't let it pool up, spread the paint around real good. Again, if the paint dries and it pools, that can be problematic. You can try to clean it up, but it's usually a pain in the butt. So just take your time with the speed paints, make sure it spreads around real easy. Now on the upper leg, I used a color called Poppy Red Speed Paint. This one, I didn't love, I'll be honest. I think if I had to redo all of these mechs, I might use like a slaughter red or blood red. I wanted to try the poppy red. I did test it out. It came out pretty decent, but it just doesn't have that that dark recess that the slaughter red has. But it does have excellent coverage. The poppy red has excellent coverage, so that's sort of a pro to this particular color. And I got in again very carefully along where that torso meets the sort of the hip assembly. If you do get some of the speed paint on the gray, just wait for it to dry, and again, go over it with some primer or whatever is necessary. Now we're going to move on to the torso. Notice I'm using speed paint medium with the Gravelord gray. I use a paper clip to actually mix it because I find that if you use the brush, it obviously makes a mess on the brush. So the paper clip actually does a really good job of mixing, I feel. But you can use whatever you want. I use speed paint medium, just one drop to about 6 or so drops of Gravelord gray. I find with the speed paint sometimes they're different consistencies. Some of the newer ones are much thinner to start. This was an older bottle, so I did need a little medium. You don't want to go real heavy on the gray. You want to get it in all of the recesses, and you want a thorough coat, but you don't want it to pool up. So spread it around real nice. And as I mentioned before, make sure you clean up any of the red or orange that happen to get on the gray before you start. The next step, this is probably the most tedious step, is doing all of the details. Weapons, heat sinks, actuators, the sensor arrays, the jump jets, whatever you feel like you want to paint and have pop out on the mech, you're going to want to paint in black to start. Some of the things you'll see in a later step, we will paint with sort of an antique copper color, and other things we will leave black. I would advise being very careful because obviously the gradient is tough to imitate. If you have to clean it up, it's not impossible, but just use a good brush with a fine tip. Take your time. Here I'm painting up, actuators under the arms and things like that. It helps to break up the monotony of the gray. So now we're on to that antique copper color. I'm going to start here with the weapons. Goes on real nice, and this is just a basic acrylic. This isn't anything special. It's another one of those folk art colors. I know there's some tremendous GW coppers out there, so you could use anything along those lines, but I thought the copper would contrast nicely against the gray as opposed to like a silver or something along those lines, which might get lost. So just took my time, again, went over the vents, went over the antennas, the jump jet ports, all of these things. This is, to reiterate, the most tedious step, doing all the little details. Just take your time, enjoy it, do what you think is right. There's no right or wrong amount of detail that you need to do. Obviously, the more you do, the more it breaks up the mech and makes it look a little more realistic. I found decals also help with that as well, so up to you how much detail you want to do. Alright, now the next step is the cockpit, and this is 4 colors I used here. First, I'm going to use a titanium white to go over all of the glass, and that's the first step, right? And make sure you got a nice thin amount of paint. I thin out the acrylic with water. I use a 000 or a 010 brush, and just work my way in through all the cockpit. The Gallowglas was easy because it has a giant cockpit. Some of the mechs obviously a little more difficult, but start with the white and then make sure the white is completely dry before moving on to the next set of colors. The pattern is basically white, speed paint, and then I use 2 metallic acrylics to get a little bit of a fade effect on the cockpit. So this speed paint is going to be my base. And you can see sometimes it goes on thin, sometimes it goes on thick, so always err on the side of multiple passes at the at the glass color. I wouldn't go on with a giant glob of paint because then if it runs out and down the mech, you're kind of in trouble. So this is the first of the blues. This is a lighter metallic blue topaz, and I'm just going to get it in. And of course, wait for the speed paint to completely dry. I know I stress that a lot, but it is important. And you can see you get a pretty decent effect. I'm not globbing on the metallic. I'm going on pretty thin, And I don't need to worry about getting up into the corners because the speed paint already did that job for me and did a really nice job of it. So just trying to get the main part of the glass with this metallic blue topaz. And then the last color is this metallic sapphire, so it's a darker blue. And I chose to kind of do the top half of the glass in this color. You could do the bottom half. You could do 4 or 5 different colors. I've seen some wild cockpits out there that look amazing. I just went the simple route. I did a dark metallic and a light metallic blue. And I'm just kind of getting along the top half, again, to give it a little bit of a gradient color, which looks pretty cool. All right, now, for the things I did not paint copper, I'm going to go over with a grim black speed paint. So this is like actuators and some of the vents that I didn't paint and things along those lines. The grim black speed paint is really, I think, great because it'll get in, if you're careful, it'll get in the recesses that you may have missed, but it also gives it a little bit of a shine, which I like, makes it pop out a little bit more. So just take your time and get in those spaces. I also went inside the jump jet ports as well with the grim black speed paint, cleaned up anything in there. The flat black doesn't give the same depth as the speed paint. And there it is. Again, just doing all the final little details here. And of course, if there are little details that you find when you go back and you're like, shoot, I should have painted that, just go back and do it. You don't have to do it in any specific order. We're going to do some weathering. You'll notice that I have the majority of the decals on the mech. I did that because the weathering should go over any of the decals. And for this, I'm using an older brush, but I'm just going around the edges. I'm almost like edge highlighting, if you will, but not in a consistent way, right? Sometimes it's a splotch, sometimes it's a line, sometimes it's a poke of the brush that you could even use a sponge like we did in the Gunsberg Eagles. So whatever you want to do, just to kind of give this mech a little bit more of a realistic, worn look. I also think the gradient is almost, too clean, absent some kind of weathering. I chose not to put mud on it because I thought the brown would get lost in there with the orange. So again, just opted to do this battle damage and weathering with a silver. And don't be shy about breaking up your decals a little bit, the caution stripes and things. You can weather those and it will give it definitely a more realistic, I guess, look. So that's it. That's all it takes. And there she blows, the Gallowglas of the Cinder Jackals. That is the command unit of this particular mercenary force. I thought it came out pretty well. When I'm doing new paint schemes, I always have a model that I test everything on. I tried all kinds of different combinations and washes and different speed paints, but this is the one that I think hit the mark for me. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial and maybe you can paint your own unit of Cinder Jackals or steal the idea with some different colors, do different gradients and things. Anyway, guys, we're going to wrap this one up. First and foremost, thanks to our Season 8.5 backers, and thank you so much to all of our patrons out there. If you want to get more involved in the channel, you can head on over to Patreon. It's as little as $2 a month. And if you want to get your own battle mechs, or paints, or brushes, or anything BattleTech related, you can head on over to Ares Games and Minis. It is my #1 stop for everything BattleTech. Best prices, fast shipping, tremendous customer service. So definitely check out Ares Games and Minis. But guys, that said, I'm all wrapped up. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a good night.